Indian arts and crafts. The Indians in the different regions of North America had different customs, different traditions, and different ways of doing things. But they all had one thing in common. They used the natural materials they found around them to create an outstanding heritage of arts and crafts. Some of the arts and crafts stemmed from their desire to decorate their clothing and other belongings. Much was in honor of the gods and spirits in which they believed. One of the most common figures in Indian art was the thunderbird. It had different meanings to different tribes. Many tribes believed that the thunderbird caused lightning by flapping its huge wings. Indian artists also recorded their own great deeds and accomplishments. Warriors were especially proud of their feats on the battlefield. North American Indians practiced a variety of art forms. One of the earliest was rock painting and rock carving. Indians of ancient times carved pictures and symbols into the smooth walls and cliffs. These carvings are called petroglyphs. They also carved small figures out of stone. Some carved shell discs called gorgets. Gorgets were worn as signs of authority. As time went on, the Indians learned to carve many beautiful and useful artifacts. The eastern woodlands provided abundant material for carving. The Indians used the wood to make a variety of practical things such as bowls and ladles, and fine wooden cradle boards. Many tribes used cradle boards to carry around their babies until they were ready to walk. They carved animal bones into beautiful combs for their hair. Carved pipes were used by most tribes, especially for important ceremonies. Plains Indians carved theirs from catlinite, a special red stone which was sacred to them. Perhaps the best carvers of all were the people of the northwest coast. Dense forests of cedar, spruce, and redwood trees provided abundant material for carving. Northwestern Indians believed that every person belonged to a clan or a group of families with the same ancestors. These ancestors may have been animals, birds, or people. The Indians thought of them as guardians, and they carved images of them in wood, stone, and ivory. The most famous of their carvings are called totem poles. Skilled artists carved figures and designs into giant cedar logs that told the story of the owner's clan and his great deeds. Every part of the pole had a meaning. The designs used on the pole belonged to the family who owned it, and the right to carve them passed down from one skilled carver to another. The artist usually did his work in secret. If it were not perfect, he would be disgraced. When the carving was finished, the pole was painted. Brushes were made by fastening porcupine quills to a wooden handle. Black paint was made from charcoal or soot, red and yellow from earth, and white from clamshells. The poles were often erected in front of their homes. The Navajos of the Southwest had a very different form of painting. The medicine men made sand paintings by dropping colored powders on clean sand. Sand paintings were part of ceremonies to cure the sick and injured. The paintings had to be destroyed before sunset of the same day they were made. Indians living on the plains painted designs on buffalo hides with colors made from earth. For a brush, the artist often used the spongy end of a buffalo bone. Warriors decorated their shields with magic designs they hoped would protect them in battle. Some tribes painted hides to keep a record of their history. Since they kept track of time by counting winters, these hides were called winter counts. Each symbol stood for the most important event of that year. The count began in the center and moved outward in a spiral. Plains Indians made a special type of storage container called a parfleche. It was made out of buffalo hide and painted or decorated with quillwork. Quillwork was the art of decorating with dyed porcupine quills. Most North American Indians were skilled at it. They were the only people known to have practiced it. Quillwork was done on many of their belongings. After glass beads were introduced to the Indians, many became skilled at beadwork too. Beads of a different kind, called wampum beads, were used by some Indians almost like money. Wampum beads were especially important to the Iroquois. The beads were made from white and purple hard clam shells or quahog shells. Since there was less purple, the purple shells became more valuable. Wampum beads were also woven into belts. These belts were used to record messages and events. One of the most widespread Indian crafts was basket making. Tribes that moved often liked baskets because they were light and unbreakable. In the Southwest, wandering Apache tribes wove baskets of grasses, roots, and stems. Some storage baskets were even large enough to hold a person. The Pomo Indians of California are world famous for the workmanship and beauty of their baskets. Some were woven so tightly that they held water without having any special treatment. In the woodlands of the Northeast, tribes living where birch bark was available didn't bother making baskets. Birch bark containers were easier to make. The bark was folded, cut, and sewn together in a variety of shapes. The square bottom and round top was most common. The outer layer of bark was scraped to form designs in the brown layer underneath. Some tribes decorated boxes with dyed porcupine quills. To the Pueblo farmers of the Southwest, pottery became more popular than basketry. Since they didn't travel much, they didn't worry about carrying heavy breakable pots. Pueblo women became skilled potters. The shapes of the vessels were determined by practical needs, but they were beautiful as well. Water storage jars were especially important. Designs were carefully painted on with a brush made from the leaf or stem of a yucca plant. Most of the colors were colored earths, yellows, dull red, and brown. Black was sometimes made with iron or manganese. After the Indians learned how to use silver, the scope of Indian arts and crafts expanded. The Navajo and other southwestern tribes became expert silversmiths. They often set turquoise stones into their jewelry. The Zuni learned the art from the Navajo. The squash blossom necklace was a popular design. Southwestern Indians also excelled in the art of weaving. In the Hopi and other Pueblo tribes, the men did the weaving. Among the Navajo, the women were the weavers. They memorized the designs and passed them on to their daughters. A small mistake was left in the work. They believed that since the design was the weaver's creation, her mind needed a place from which to escape. The Chilkat Indians of the northwest coast wove beautiful blankets, shirts, and aprons out of shredded cedar bark and mountain goat wool. These took a very long time to weave, and they were prized by other tribes as ceremonial clothing. Masks played an important part in many Indian ceremonies. Members of the Husk-Face Society in the Iroquois tribes wore bushy masks made of corn husks in the hopes of a good crop. Members of the False Face Societies of the Iroquois tribes wore false face masks to drive away evil spirits and cure the sick. The mask was carved from a living tree to give it life. It was then cut from the tree and painted. If it was cut in the morning, it was painted red. If it was cut in the afternoon, it was painted black. Kwakiutl Indians of the northwest coast made large double masks for some of their ceremonies. When the dancer pulled a hidden string, the mask opened to reveal an inner mask. Pueblo Indians held festivals in honor of Kachina spirits, who were believed to visit the villages to help the people. The Kachina dancers wore masks of deer or buffalo hide. The children were given Kachina dolls to remind them of the many Kachina spirits. Like most peoples, Indians too were fond of music. Many tribes had songs for war, hunting, games, and special ceremonies. In some tribes, ceremonial dances were accompanied by drums partly filled with water. Rattles were popular with many tribes. They were made out of a variety of materials. Many were made of gourds and other plants. In some tribes, the young men played flutes to court their girlfriends. Although the girls were allowed to listen, they were seldom allowed to leave their homes while the music was being played. Throughout the continent, North American Indians created a rich heritage of arts and crafts. Inspired by necessity and the desire for self-expression, they used the natural materials to fashion both beautiful and useful artifacts.